Hey everybody, it is I, MisterSkids, and I absolutely love / adore this movie. I want to talk about what made this movie so great, but I also wanted to point out what could have made it a lot better. It has a lot of obvious flaws that could have been improved upon, but it also has a lot of heart. And I, the masterful MisterSkids, am here to discuss the good, the bad, and the ugly of In This Corner of the World. This movie is a 2-hour-long adaptation from a manga of the same name, written by Fumio Kono. Please don't judge my pronunciation. It tells the story of a girl named Suzu and her life in the 1930s and 40s during World War II, as she moves from a peaceful Hiroshima to Kure, a Japanese town that houses a naval shipyard. It's a slice-of-life story with romance and drama sprinkled in. The characters just trying to live day by day in a dark time. While the movie is fictional by nature, it is based on actual accounts of what happened during the war. Surprisingly, this movie was crowdfunded back in 2015, raising 39 million yen when their goal was a mere 20 million. You can see that allowed them to go the extra mile, not only with the animation, but with how the team extensively researched the time period. They used a number of old photos, documents, and even had elderly survivors to help draw up the cities as they were at the time. During an interview, the director, Suni Katabuchi, explained that one shot in particular was revised 20 times until it was done right. The story itself feels like a roller coaster of emotions as we watch these characters deal with not only the world's problems, but their own. It does a good job showing the hardships of war while not demonizing the Allied forces, never really focusing on the war itself and instead showcasing the characters' personalities. Even though we barely see the American soldiers, they're still portrayed as human, just like the Japanese soldiers. Saying that though, the plot does have a few bumps. The movie's most glaring issue is its pacing. The transitions between Kure and Hiroshima can be rather jarring and poorly explained. There's also the issue of the characters that don't really get any introduction and suddenly just turn up, making you wonder if we were supposed to recognize them or not. Combine these with the numerous time skips, which you have to be paying close attention to, and you have a formula for a terribly confusing storyline. I had to go and rewind the movie more than once just to figure out what was happening. One character in particular seems completely out of place, which is especially unfortunate considering it's one of the first major events of the movie. When Suzu is still young, she gets lost trying to bring an order to a store for her family. She finds a strangely cloaked man who offers to help her find her way by taking her inside his basket. It turns out that this friendly man is actually a monster and a kidnapper, with another boy already inside the basket. This troll-like monster really doesn't fit into the story all that well, as there's no other fantastical creatures in this movie. Plus, the film is supposed to be gritty and realistic, so having such a creature really misrepresents the rest of the film, and is completely out of place. Immersion! Another shortcoming of this animation is the portrayal of Rin, or Lin, depending on whichever translator has done the work for you English-speaking plebs. In the movie, we only see her once or twice, and in the ending credits, we're shown a little story about her past. However, in the manga, she plays a more vital role as a friend to Suzu. After reading the series, I wish she had a larger part in the animation. Instead, we got nearly 5 minutes of Suzu cooking wild vegetables and roots. I know they put that in there to show how times were tough and how people had to fend for themselves, but we didn't need half the movie being the Food Network's hottest new show, cooking random crap with Suzu. You know, I went back and watched the trailer for this movie and noticed some missing scenes that were in the manga and not in the movie itself. So I have to wonder how much was cut from the final release. The movie was already long as it is, so they probably had to trim it down. On the plus side, the movie has a distinct art style, bringing the comics to life but keeping it stylistically pleasing to the eye. Most of the backgrounds and scenery look like they were painted on a canvas, making both grand landscapes and mundane backdrops shine in a unique way. The colors and the shading are very gentle and soft, and the characters fit right into the world with all the faded shades. However, MAPPA, the production team that created this movie, made some stylistic choices that can be a bit hard to swallow. I understand they were trying to be accurate to the comic as possible, but what works in one medium may be a poor choice in another. Sometimes the effects work exceedingly well, and sometimes they feel incredibly forced. You can tell they put a lot of effort into these moments, but sometimes it does more harm than good. Another issue is that early on in the movie, it's difficult to place just how old each person is. Many of the people look much younger than they really are, to the point where a question about someone's age feels more like an attempt at a joke. Later on, though, it gets much easier to tell as you spend more time with the character design. Humor in this movie can be rather hit or miss. If you like character interactions and some clumsy slapstick comedy, then you'll have a good time. However, if that doesn't tickle your fancy, then you will find a lot of the jokes can be tedious. Some of the interactions, especially early on, are quite awkwardly timed, causing the humor to kind of fall flat. The music used in the movie is absolutely perfect though. The soundtrack only has a handful of songs, yet each one of the tracks is beautiful and whimsical, adding significance to the story every time they're put into play. The sound design too is amazing. The world sounds so natural and quiet until the loud booming and crashing suddenly washes everything else out, just as it would in real life. All in all though, it's a pretty good movie. Though after reading the manga, I can say that it has the far better pacing. It's much easier to follow, as characters are given proper introductions and time skips are easier to wrap your head around. It seems this movie was created as fan service to people who read the comic to give them something nice to watch. But in the end, I gave In This Corner of the World a 7.5 out of 10. It would have been near perfect had the flaws been fixed, but I had fun watching it nonetheless. If you want to take an emotional ride with many highs and lows, I recommend this movie. However, the story presentation leaves something to be desired, which is a shame considering how well made this animation is. You can tell that MAPPA really put their heart and soul into this movie, and even with its faults, I certainly still well remember In This Corner of the World fondly.